Hey everyone, welcome to On Tap. I'm Chris, and today we'll be talking about the beer drunk by none other than the most interesting man in the world, Dos Equis. Adelante. Now, Dos Equis is not actually a brewery. Rather, it's the name of a beer produced by one of the largest Mexican breweries in the country, Cervecería Cuauhtémoc Moctezuma, which is based in the province of Nuevo León in the city of Monterrey in Mexico. And this is actually the same company that produces other very well-known labels of beer such as Tecate, Bohemia, and Sol. Now, the Cervecería Cuauhtémoc Moctezuma, if you can't guess by the name, was actually founded by who else but, the Germans. In this case, a German man named Wilhelm Hasse, who emigrated from Germany, moved to Mexico, eventually permanently settled there, and then opened up this first brewery in the city of Veracruz. So let's think of him maybe as a German-born Mexican man. Hasse started the brewery, but I'm going to be talking about Dos Equis in particular because it's really its own brand. It's like in the Corona episode, where Corona is not actually a brewery, it's a style of beer made by Modelo. The first Dos Equis beer was made in 1897, and it was a Vienna-style lager, which is, today, it's the same recipe as the Dos Equis Amber. It was called Dos Equis because Dos Equis just means two X's in Spanish. And if you actually look on the bottle, right, you can obviously see there's two X's. These two X's, think of it as like the Roman numeral. And it was called 20 in honor of the new 20th century that was fast approaching at the creation of the beer, in again, 1897. So it's sort of like the Spanish language beer version of 20th century Fox, which is kind of cool. And I sort of didn't know that until reading about that for this video. And this change was actually even more clear with the original name of the beer when it was called Siglo Dos Equis, or Century, which is an even more obvious reference. Dos Equis proceeded to become a major Mexican beer, and in 1983 was first imported into the United States. And then in 2009, Dos Equis was one of the fastest growing imported beers into the States. The beer also has on its logo an image of Montezuma, or Moctezuma, the Aztec ruler who faced off against and was defeated by the Spanish, led by Hernán Cortés in sort of 1519, 1520. Which makes sense given the fact that the brewery is named after the guy, and that's Montezuma and not Cortés. Now, Dos Equis is very prolific in North America, whether you live in Mexico, the United States, or even Canada, I understand. It is also available in certain Latin American countries, as well as parts of Europe and East Asia, though I understand it's a bit harder to find depending on which non-North American country you live in. So the Dos Equis brewery, the Cervecería Cuauhtémoc Moctezuma, is actually a Heineken subsidiary, like so many other beer companies around the world. And what this means is that Dos Equis promotes sort of responsible drinking very clearly on its webpage, just like Heineken, which is always a good thing. Now, I know I've talked about commercials in the past regarding some breweries, but let's be honest, Dos Equis takes its commercial game to a whole nother level. I am, of course, referring to the most interesting man in the world. Now, for those of you who don't know, this was a series of commercials released starting in 2006 by Dos Equis, starring a very suave, worldly, elderly gentleman in a suit. The commercial would start with the man talking about his larger-than-life exploits that he did as a youth. It would then show these various adventurous and death-defying activities in flashback. And then the man would go to a bar, and the commercial would always invariably end with, you know what? Let's just roll the tape.
I don't always drink beer, but when I do, I prefer Dos Equis. Stay thirsty, my friends.
And thus was born a classic commercial. And actually in 2016, the most interesting man in the world was given quite the heroic send-off, a one-way trip to Mars in a rocket ship. And the people of Earth bid him farewell to mark the end of his tenure. And here's the thing, he's not even Mexican or Spanish. He's not even un hispanoparlante nativo at all, or a native Spanish speaker. He's an American guy called Jonathan Goldstein. And the new guy's French. I mean, I guess not that that matters, but I was very surprised to find that out. And the reason for that, I suppose, is that Goldstein apparently just was on fire in the audition. He just blew everyone away with just a ton of excellent improv, which makes sense if you want to land a role such as the most interesting man in the world. Oh, and when I said that the new guy's French, what I mean is there's a new most interesting man in the world who, since 2016, has carried the Dos Equis torch. Also, the company did change its ending tagline. Now it is, keep it interesante. But at the end of the day, if you're being given a respectful parody in a Robot Chicken episode starring Boba Fett, you know you've pretty much won gold in the Olympics of commercials.
Boba Fett is the most interesting bounty hunter in the galaxy.
Now, historically, Dos Equis has been known for really two primary beers, but as of late, they've been playing around with some very interesting flavor combinations. starting off is the Equis Especial, and this is definitely the company's flagship beer. It is a pale lager brewed in the German style and is most widely available in stores. Equis Amber. The original beer started on the Equis label. This is a Vienna-style lager, and I would imagine thus it's going to be a little bit more complex maybe than the original lager, and it's still pretty findable in stores, but maybe a little bit less so. Lime and salt. The classic pairing of flavor one would have with tequila, or, well, more likely you're probably drinking mezcal. But anyway, I would imagine that classic sort of lime and kind of bright flavor I get in a lot of Mexican beers is really going to come through in this one. It's not available everywhere though. I think you can mostly just find it in sort of the American Southwest and then some other hot weather US states. But on top of that, we will also be trying watermelon, pineapple, and cucumber flavored lager beer. Yes, you heard that right. And I gotta give Dos Equis props for actually making beer with the flavors of cucumber, watermelon, and pineapple. Because I guess they just like to keep it interesante. Let's try some Dos Equis beers, shall we? Well, first up, Dos Equis Especial. That's perfectly fine. This is an interesting lager because it's not gonna be as bright and citrusy as something like a Corona, or a Pacifico or something like that, but it's gonna be slightly more bright than something like a Heineken or a Beck's, or a little bit of that brightness, not a ton, still in the vein of more kind of Mexican character to it. Next up is the original Dos Equis Amber. It's kind of a thin amber beer, and it maybe even has just a tiny little, not much, but a tiny little hint of that, you know, sort of like slightly almost like sour grain flavor of beer that's not particularly of the absolute best quality. So we've tried the two Dos Equis sort of regular beers. Let's now move on to some of their experimental flavors. So let's start out with the lime and salt. I can taste the lime, and I can definitely taste the salt. It tastes like a sort of carbonated lime and salt alcoholic beverage. So if you like lime and salt as an alcoholic carbonated beverage, you will like this. Now let us try watermelon. You know, watermelon, not when it's super kind of, sometimes watermelon can be a little tasteless, right? But watermelon where it's at that stage where it's just getting very slightly tangy, right? It's sort of like a sweet, tangy flavor with watermelon. This is older watermelon, right? When it's sort of, maybe you've had a picnic, right? And you've kind of put it in the fridge and you take it out the next day and it's got a little bit of that tang to it. That's kind of the state of the watermelon in the flavor of this beer. Pineapple. Pineapple, that's really what this comes down to. The flavor is pretty much sort of incorporated the same into all of them, right? Where it's this very clear one note flavored beer, right? There's not sort of other stuff behind it. It's just, yep, you got pineapple flavored carbonated beverage. The last beer we have is Dos Equis Cucumber. It's like a vegetable, a light vegetable, but like a vegetable version of a hard seltzer beer. That's certainly not a combination of flavors you hear about every day. I'm gonna try all the experimental ones and see how do they actually taste compared to each other. I got cucumber, pineapple, and then my final assessment of Dos Equis is what? Well, it's very simple. I don't usually drink beer, but when I do, I prefer Dos Equis. Stay thirsty, my friends. Okay, seriously, I'll stop with that. But you get the idea. I've broken the two up. There's sort of what I'm gonna call actual beer and then beer-related beverages. I just decided it's not really doable to kind of compare these two things together because they're really just, they're separate concepts. So let's start with the regular beer. In second place, for sure, is Dos Equis Amber. It's still not very exemplary. It feels kind of thin. There's really not much flavor. There's just a tiny little bit of that sort of, you know, almost sour grain flavor of beer that's not particularly brewed to sort of, you know, I would say the highest level. In the same category too, and I've talked about this with some other beers in the past, like Kirin Ichiban, for example. If there was nothing else, you just had like light beers and this, I'd say fine, but that's pretty much it. And this one is definitely number one. This is a perfectly fine lager. So this one is sort of, it's a nice halfway point between kind of your standard, your typical beer, you know, like your Heineken, your Beck's, something like that, while also being slightly more towards the side of being like a Mexican beer that you'd think of with that sort of stronger, bright flavor to it. Now over here, we have our beer-related alcoholic beverages, I will call them. They are beers, so they are beers, but really, if you do try these, I think you'll see what I mean about them being sort of like beer-related beverages. The drinking experience is not that of beer. The drinking experience is that of really something more akin to like a flavored hard seltzer beer hybrid. Honestly, it really just comes down to which of these flavors would you prefer? Pineapple, lime and salt, watermelon, cucumber. I personally would say pineapple is the most sort of acceptable. Lime and salt, if you like lime with a little bit of salt, sort of that, you know, if you're a fan of that sort of mezcal tequila experience, you might think this is okay. It starts getting pretty dicey down here. And watermelon it's kind of got, as I said, that sort of sweet, tangy flavor. And then this one, I can't do like vegetable flavored hard seltzer. It doesn't work for me. So the cucumber, just no. I think of all of these here as hot summer weather, outdoor daytime drink. And in pretty much any other situation, I wouldn't really consider consuming any of these. And that's maybe the one advantage that these do have over more sort of typical beers, but even compared to a lager, it's tough, is if it is just so hot out, it's just disgusting, and for whatever reason you decide it's fun standing in an oven. If you're in California or Texas or something like this, and it's August and it's like 100 degrees, and you just think, you know what I'd really like? I'd like a flavored Dos Equis beer-like beverage. Go with one of these. But aside from that, this one, yes, I just skip it. This is just the one that I would go with. With everything we got on the table, just go with the basic Dos Equis regular lager. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. Did you know that if you just hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and even hit the notification bell, that's maybe extra credit, all of that takes like less than 10 seconds? Thanks, and we'll see you next time.